So on 46b at the very last line, and we can Prophet Elisha, and specifically the incident where he sicked a bunch of bears on a bunch of children who mocked him. Two bears came out of the forest and they ripped apart 42 children. Rav and Shmuel had a dispute. One says this was a miraculous event, and the other says it was doubly miraculous. One says it was just one miracle, like there was a forest there, but there were no bears. So Elisha conjured up these bears. But one says it's a double miracle. There was no forest, there was no bears. Elisha conjured both the forest and the bears to punish these children. So like, what do you need the forest for? Just get the bears, right? Because they would have been afraid. It's unclear if it means the bears would have been afraid without the cover of the forest, or perhaps the children would have been afraid. Would have been afraid when they saw the bears come in the open, and they would have fled, and the bears wouldn't have been able to attack them. What's why do these 42 children get destroyed by bears? Because of the 42 sacrifices that Balak, the king of Moab, sacrificed. So in the story of Bilam, where 3 times Balak set him up with to curse the Jewish people on a mountaintop, and each time there was sacrifices, seven altars, each with two sacrifices on them. So it comes out to a total of 42. In other words, so that potential curse, even though it never was actualized regarding the Jewish people in the desert in the time of Balak and Bilam, nonetheless, it had this effect later on. These are all, theologically very kind of, raises a lot of questions. All of these things, which I'm not going to address. Because I don't know the answer. Any is so it's like Balak is being rewarded for these sacrifices. Person should always engage in Torah and mitzvahs, even if it's not for their own sake, because if you get habituated to them, you'll eventually come to do them for the right motive. Because of these 42 sacrifices that Balak brought, his reward was one of his descendants was Ruth, and Ruth was the ancestor of Shlomo, and of course David. Shekazube Elef Olos Yala Shlomo. And about Shlomo, King Solomon, it's written that every day he would offer 1,000 sacrifices. So that was his reward for sacrificing, even though his motives were not good. Ultimately, he is rewarded by having Shlomo, the big sacrificer, as a descendant. And how do we know that he was a descendant? Ruth was the daughter of Eglon, king of Moab, who was a descendant of Balak. So anyway, the point is that was his reward for the sacrifices. So, like, what's up with the 42 children? So the answer is Tavasomia Liklala. Like, we don't. This Avi Medrash looks at this as a positive thing, as something he's rewarded for. But his purpose, true, these sacrifices were, at least in the view of this passage, were to God. But his intention was evil. His intention was to curse them, and so that curse, in a way, came true in this incident of the bear. So the people of the city said to Elisha, that this is, you can see that this is a good city, but the water, and they continue, the water is no good and the land makes people die. But if the water is bad and the land is no good, what's good about the city? People who live in the city tend to appreciate their own city, even though from an objective point of view, there are problems with it, but the local residents still have civic pride. Or there are three things that people tend to favor: a place where they live; appreciates his wife; and someone who buys something tends to be satisfied with it. Again, even if they are less than perfect. Rabbi Stad, Elisha became sick 3 times in his life. One, because he summoned these bears to kill these children. And one, because he rejected his servant Gehazi. Gehazi was his protege and did not follow his instructions. And he rejected him categorically. And we'll just and the third sickness was the one that he ultimately died of. Elisha became sick with the disease that he would die from, which implies that there were other diseases that he had besides the one that he died from. About this idea of rejecting someone categorically with both hands, as it were. A person rejecting somebody should do it with one hand, your right hand pushing him away, but your left hand trying to bring him close. In other words, you should leave an opening for reconciliation. Not like Elisha, who categorically rejected Gehazi. And not like Rabbi Yeshua ben Parachia, who also had an incident where he rejected the student. We'll see what these incidents are. Elisha Mahi, what's the case of Elisha? So when Elisha sent Gehazi to cure Naaman, the foreign general, of his leprosy, his saras, so Naaman wanted to pay him. He says, like, take these two measures of כאשר הפך איש מעל מרכבתו לקרסך, העץ לקח את הכסף ולקח את בגדים, וזדייסים קרמים וצאנו רק הרולדים בשבחה. So when Gehazi comes back to Elisha, he says, why were you successful with Naaman, with removing his disease? Because my spirit was with you. It's not the time to be taking rewards of silver and clothing and olives and vineyards, cattle and servants. Like, you shouldn't be profiting from this. Gemara says, well, what is Elisha telling them? They took all these things. Naaman offered him money and clothes, not all these other things. So why does Elisha list these 8 things? Because what was Elisha doing at the time? He was learning the parak. I mean, this is a complete anachronism because, of course, the Gemara hadn't been written yet, or the Mishnah, but he was learning this chapter called Shmona Shratzim, right? The 8 kinds of shratzim, of creepy crawlers that make you tummy. Amar lo Rasha, Hidia Esli Tol Schar Shmona Shratzim. The time's come for you to take the reward for studying this chapter of Shmona Shratzim. In other words, like, you're taking your reward now. You're taking 8 things. He didn't really take 8 things, but he's hinting to him that this reward that you're taking is the reward that you get for learning Shmona Shratzim, and you're not going to get your reward later in the world to come. And not only that, but may Naaman's tzaras stick to you and your children for all time. And did this come true? So we have another incident of Mitzrayim in the time of Torahs that we read. Um, it's from Malachim. The story of the four Mitzrayim, people with tzaras who had expelled from the city during a time of siege, and they wandered over to they figured they'll just, they're going to die anyway. They might as well give themselves up to the invading army of Assyrians, I think it was. And they get to the camp and they see that everyone has miraculously fled. So, who are these four Mitzrayim, these four people with tzaras? That Gehazi and his three sons. So we see that because he did get tzaras and pass it on to his children. Elisha Damascus. So Elisha goes to Damascus. Why did he go? Actually, he went to try to bring Gehazi back to the right path. But it didn't work. Elisha says, repent. I learned from you, Elisha, that someone who sins and causes others to sin doesn't get the opportunity to do tshuva. Mayavi, what is this? What did he do that caused others to sin? Some say that he performed some kind of magnetic trick with the idol of Yeravam and made it levitate so that people would believe in it. And he suspended it between heaven and earth. And I would use some kind of magnet to suspend this idol. Some say that the way he did this was he inscribed the divine name inside the mouth of this idol, and that's how it magically suspended between heaven and earth. And the idol would say the first of the 10 commandments, and saying that I am God. The idol would be saying, I am God, and you shouldn't have any other gods besides me. So that is how Gehazi caused others to sin. Some say that he caused the rabbis to leave the presence of Elisha. The students of the prophet of Elisha said to him, the place where we are is too small for us. We called that like suddenly it became it wasn't when Gehazi was still Elisha's disciple, it wasn't too crowded, and now it became too crowded. Now that Gehazi is not there anymore, implying that Gehazi being around was what caused people not to follow Elisha. So that would be his sin of causing others to stray. Yeshua ben Parachia, what's the story of Yeshua ben Parachia rejecting someone? When Yanai, the king Yanai, was killing the rabbis. It's a story of Yanai was the rabbis of the time opposed his coronation. Excuse me. And so he had them killed. Rabbi Shimon Parachia, I'm sorry. Shimon ben Shetach atminu achas. So two rabbis escaped. Shimon ben Shetach was hidden by his sister, who was the queen, actually. She put him in hiding. Rabbi Shimon ben Parachia azal arak Alexandria shel Mitzrayim. And Yeshua ben Parachia fled to Alexandria. When things settled down, Shalach le Shimon ben Shetach. Shimon ben Shetach sent Yeshua ben Parachia a message. Mini Yerushalayim Yerakodesh Lach Alexandria Shel Mitzrayim. From me, Jerusalem, the holy city, to Alexandria. Achosi Bali Shorei Besochech Vani Yosheves Shomema. My sister said, my master lives with you, dwells in your midst, and I am alone. Right? Like you Yeshua ben Parachia, you've got it good there in Alexandria, and I'm here. Jerusalem is not doing so well. Amar Shmami Nahavale Shlama. So when he got this letter, he's like, okay, This means that it's time to return to Jerusalem. In other words, it's okay, like things have settled down. He also and as he was going back to Jerusalem, he came, stayed overnight at a hotel. Come Kamayo Bikara Shapir. So his the people there honored him. They stood up to honor him. Abdullah Yakar too, and they gave him a lot of honor. Yossi become Ishtabach Kamanach. So he was saying, "What a nice hotel this is." Actually referring to the hostess, right? To the innkeeper. He says he says, "What a beautiful hostess." Amalo Echad Mitalmida, Rabbi, ain't true to us, Rabbi. Like you think she's, you think she's beautiful? Her eyes are too round. Amalo Rasha B'Kachata Osek. What? That's what you're doing. You're looking at this woman's eyes. You shouldn't be looking at other women. Apik Arba Mea Shipore V'Shamte. Took out 400 shofars, and he put him in. He excommunicated him. And every day the student would try to get back in the good graces, try to ask for forgiveness, but he didn't accept it. One day, Rishuv ben Barakah was reading Shema. When the student came before him, this time, Yeshua ben Barakah says, "You know what? It's enough already. I'm going to take this guy back. I'm going to let him. I'm going to forgive him." But he's reading Shema, so he can't, interrupt to give this guy the good news. So he kind of motions him with his hand. So what does the guy think? He's already, rejected him so many times. He figures he's just brushing him off again. So he went and he set up a stone, a brick, and made it into an idol. So Rishuv ben Barakah said to him, "Do tshuva." I'm too late for me now that I've built this church to this new God, this temple to this new idol. It's too late for me because I've caused others to sin. Also said about the student that he he incited others to worship and cause them to Tanya. And we have a bride. So Rishon ben Lazar Omer Yetzer Tinok V'Isha. When you're dealing with your Yetzer Hara or a child or a woman, take small dochav yamin v'kareves. Like push them away with one hand, but also bring them close with another hand. In other words, to the Yetzer Hara, there's as Gemara remarks elsewhere, there's a good purpose for Yetzer Hara. So, for example, people are lustful, but that ends up in procreation, which is a good thing. So that's why we shouldn't be too quick to reject things that have negative aspects. They may have positive aspects as well. By the way, so I don't forget, I see Robert has joined us. So Shiu Mazel Tov on the birth of your new grandchild.
Yes, Mazel Tov. Lots of luck.
Next Mishnah. Nimsa HaHoreg. So now we're back to the Eglah Rufa, right? The ceremony in which a murder victim is discovered between two cities, and we don't know who is responsible. We haven't found the culprit. So the basin has to go through the cemetery to absolve themselves of responsibility. So let's say you've designated this calf to break its neck in the gully, as the ritual dictates, and then the murderer is found. What do you do with the calf? It just goes out and becomes a regular calf again. There's no consequence to it having been designated as an Eglah Rufa and not having been used. Once you've done the ceremony and you've broken the neck of the calf, and then the murderer is found, so then you bury it there as it's supposed to be done with any Eglah Rufa. Like what was the to atone for a suffix for something that was uncertain. We didn't know who the murderer was. Keep us fake of so it accomplished its purpose. Like at the time, we didn't know who the murderer was. Half had its neck broken, as the ceremony dictates, and so that doubt was actually resolved. Not the doubt was resolved, but the issue was resolved. The fact that you later found the murderer doesn't take away from the fact that this is a valid eglah rufa, and at the time, it was valid to break its neck. Therefore, eglah and also in this case, the murderer is executed. Okay, so the fact that we kind of atoned for the murder with this eglah rufa thing doesn't let the actual murderer off of his responsibility. If he's caught, then he is dealt with like any other murderer, and it deserves capital punishment if it is. Excuse me. One witness says, "I witnessed the murder." Another witness says, "No, you didn't." Presumably because you were in, you were elsewhere with me at the time. You couldn't have been a witness. Classic case of an eid zomen. Or Isha Omeres Raisi, Isha Omeres Larisi. One woman says, "I saw the murder," and another woman says, "No, you didn't." How you are? Then that is a case of suffix. We don't think that we know who the murderer was because there's conflicting testimony, and neither of which is particularly reliable because it's one witness. Then you do the eglah rufa ceremony. If one witness says, I witnessed the murder, and two says, "No, you didn't, you were with us at the time," how you are? Again, that testimony is not valid for anything, and you do the eglah rufa. If two witnesses say we witnessed the murder, and one person comes and says, "But weren't you with me in Cincinnati that day?" Then lo hayu arfin. So even though the testimony of the two witnesses is then the murderer is identified by the two witnesses. That's valid. The one witness who counters them is not, does not have the same standing, and so the murderer has been identified, and there's no eglah rufa. One time there was a lot of homicide going on, so they discontinued the eglah rufa ritual. Mishabar Elazar ben Dinai. This was referring to when this guy Eliezer ben Dinai, who was a prolific murderer, was in his day. Utchina ben Prisha Hayan Nikra, and he was also called Tchina ben Prisha. Chasru Likroso ben Haratzlan, and then people just started calling him the murderer. Misharabu Menafim Pasku Hamayim Hamarim. Similarly, when there was a lot of adultery going on, they stopped doing the Sotah, the Sotah ritual. Presumably because the Sotah water would not work, as we've seen before, if the husband was also unfaithful, had also been unfaithful. But of course, people wouldn't necessarily know. But what this means was a lot of adulterers, then there would presumably have been a lot of cases of Sotah where the water didn't work, not because the woman was innocent, but because the husband was guilty. But people wouldn't know why it didn't work, so that's why they stopped doing the ceremony, because it looked like it wasn't working anymore. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was the one who discontinued it. Shnamar, and he based himself on this pasuk. Lo efkol al benosechem ki tiznena ve'al kalosechem ki tnaafna kihem. What's the rest of it? Kihem am hazonos yipardu the am hakadeshos yizbuchu ba'am loyachin yilaveh, which means I won't take account of your women when they commit adultery, or your daughters-in-law, because you yourselves also are guilty of the same thing. So that's the kind of reflects the same thinking. Misha Meisra Yossi ben Yozri Shreda Yossi ben Yuli Yerushalayim Batlu HaEshkolos. When these two died, the Eshkolos, which means like the great students, the great scholars, they also ceased to be. There's no an eshkol really means a cluster of grapes, right? There's no eshkol to eat. My soul wants the first ripe fruit. So that's the that is the this is from Micha, and he's using this as a metaphor. This ripe fruit, he's using it as a metaphor for tzaddikim. So that's how we get the idea that an eshkol, that a bunch of fruit is a cluster of fruit, is a metaphor for Torah scholars. Yochanan Kohen Gadol Havir Hodayas Hamaser. Yochanan the Kohen Gadol stopped the reading of the Maser, right? When every 3 years, when people brought their Maser to Jerusalem, and they had this whole declaration that they were that they didn't eat any of it when they were Tameh. And the Gemara will explain why he discontinued this. Afu Bitel Samarin. He also discontinued the wakers and the strikers. We'll see what that is as well. Until his time, then they would like bang hammers in Yerushalayim. Again, the Gemara will explain under what circumstances, and he did away with it. Also, so Demai is produce of which you don't know the status if it has had Truma taken away from it, Truma and Maser taken from it. If it has not had Truma taken from it, you can't eat it until you do so. So it used to be that people were, that if you didn't know the status, you could assume most people took Truma and Maser, but that wasn't the case anymore. And so not only could you not make that assumption, but you didn't even need to ask the question, was Truma and Maser taken from this? Because the assumption became that no, it was not. So you couldn't even examine it. You had to assume. You didn't know, you bought stuff in the marketplace and you didn't know its source. You had to assume that it was that it was not did not have Truma and Maser taken from it. You had to do that yourself. The rabbis taught. Minayin. Okay, Minayin. Where do you get this? What we had in the Mishnah, that if the Egla Rufa was done and then the murderer is found, the murderer is still liable. Because in the passage about the Egla Rufa, it says the earth will not be atoned for the blood which was spilled on it, except with the blood of he who spilled the blood, except the blood of the murderer. So even in the context of the Egla Rufa, like the real expiation for murder is the punishment of the murder. Now, right? If one witness says, I saw him, I saw the murder, I witnessed it, and another aide says, no, you didn't. Tama demachis. So, the question the Gemara has is, wait, we're dealing with one witness here, right? So you brought me a case and said, if there's a contradicting single witness, then there's no Egla Rufa. But that implies, what if you just have a single witness and no one disputes him? So is one witness believed in order to not do the Egla Rufa? Not immediately. Where do you get that from? Usually you need two witnesses to establish a fact. The rabbis taught, again, in the chapter of Egla Rufa, it says that the case is not known who murdered this person. Hanoda, Miko, but if it is known, even if somebody knows, right? We know that there was a witness, even if you don't have that witness, but if known by somebody what happened. Lo Yarfin, there was no Eglar Rufa. So certainly if we have a witness that come and testifies to us, then why with so it doesn't imply that the murderer should be punished with one witness, but it does tell us that there's no Eglar Rufa even if there's only one witness. Rabbi Akiva Omer, you have the whole Sanhedrin, the whole court that sees the witness as a murder. They don't know who it is, right? It's a stranger. They wouldn't do the Eglar Rufa. Kind of obvious. I mean, it's like, okay, you can't. I guess it's because you can't convict the murderer, right? Because you don't know who he is. Like you witnessed this, but then you can't find the guy, right? So do you still do the Eglar Rufa? Rabbi Akiva says no. Why? In the formula that the Sanhedrin recites over the breaking of the neck, it says, we're not guilty of this murder, we the Sanhedrin or the people found or whatever, because we didn't see it. So this implies that in this case, if they saw him, so true, they can't convict him because they can't find him now. But they did see it, so therefore the Eglar Rufa doesn't. So now that we say that one witness is believed, wait a second. So you're saying that with regard to Eglar Rufa specifically, we believe one witness. Now he's being contradicted by one witness, but one witness isn't enough to contradict testimony, right? So you're giving special status to the testimony. How can it be refuted by only a single witness? The Lula says anytime you have where the Torah makes an exception to the rule of two witnesses and says, yes, here one witness is believed, it has the same validity as anywhere else where you have two witnesses, right? So then the one witness who comes the one witness who comes to contradict that, he has no standing, right? He doesn't have any special dispensation that he has greater standing than two witnesses. So we should believe the one guy. Why do we say that that we still do the Eglar Rufa? With answer Tane, this is how we have to reread the Mishnah. Lo Hayu then we're going to turn the Mishnah upside down. We're going to say in that case there was no ritual of Eglar Rufa because the one witness who claimed to have seen it, to have witnessed the murder, he is believed. So there's no Eglar Rufa. One other witness contradicts him. Rabbi Yitzchak said the same thing. We have to change the Mishnah. Rabbi says, no, the Mishnah is as we read it. Or Rabbi Kashadu. So what does Rabbi answer about the special status of the witness who witnessed the murder? So how can he be contradicted by a single other witness? If they came and testified at the same time, then that's only the Ula's rule only applies if the single witness who claimed he witnessed the murder, if his testimony is presented to the court and the court accepts it, then it has the special status. But if two people come at the same time and they're bickering, one says, I witnessed this, and the other one says, no, you didn't, and he doesn't get that special status, and that's why the Mishnah says, in that case, lo hayu arfin, then they would do the Eglar Rufa, because none of this witnessing has any validity. We have a Mishnah. One witness says, this is our Mishnah. One witness says, I saw it, and two says, no, you didn't. They would do the Eglar Rufa. Wait, this implies that that if it was 1 versus 1, then like by saying that 1 versus 2, there's no Eglar Rufa. So that implies that 1 versus 1, there is an Eglar Rufa. Sorry, other way around. If there's 1 versus 2, then there's no Eglar Rufa because we believe the two who contradict the testimony. So that implies that 1 versus 1, there would not be an Eglar Rufa. Just a Rabbi Chia. The question is Rabbi Chia, L'tamech ema seifa. Okay, so that's what you think. Then look at the end of the Mishnah. Two witnesses say we witnessed the murder. One says no, you didn't. There's no Eglar Rufa because we accept the testimony of the witnessing of the murder. So if you extrapolate from that, well, what if there's only one witness to the murder? Then you would say, oh, then we do the Eglar Rufa. In other words, we don't accept testimony. So, you're implying two opposite. If you're going to go with that level of reading the Mishnah and implying what's not said, you end up with two contradictory implications. So how do you explain the Mishnah? We're talking about the whole Mishnah is talking about people who are not valid witnesses. Okay, so that's a whole new thing on the Mishnah. And of course, with Rabbi Nechemia, anywhere one witness is valid, go by the authority, meaning that since we're in a special situation here where we're believing people who are usually not valid witnesses, they're not eligible to be valid witnesses. So now we have a whole different rule book. And in this case, we don't go by the usual rules of who came first, who came second, what did they say exactly. No, we go with what's the majority. So if you have, 5 invalid witnesses saying one thing and 4 saying the opposite, in the case where they're all psuleidos, where none of this is really valid testimony, then we'll go with the majority, which is not the usual thing. So v'asu shtei nashim be'ishachad. So kishnei anashim be'ishachad. So in that case, 2 women testifying about against one man you just go by the majority, right? The women have the same standing as the man who is pasuleidos. That's why we're not taking implications from these cases of the Mishnah. We're just going with the number of people. If the Mishnah is only talking about psuleidos, then it's a question of how many are on each side. Some read it like this: any case where first witness, single witness, is a regular valid witness. Then we don't go by the majority. If 100 women or other psuleidos, 100 other people who are not valid witnesses come to contradict him, then we don't pay them any mind, right? We've already accepted the testimony of this one usually invalid aid. So what's our Mishnah talking about? So in other words, we don't go with the majority rule, majority of witnesses rule. So what's going on here in the Mishnah? Talking about first witness is a woman or some other invalid witness. Comes and says, I witnessed the murder. And then 2 other invalid witnesses disputed that. The Tarza Ladibre Rabbi Nechemia, and this is how you understand what Rabbi Nechemia said. Nechemia Amar, Kol Makom Shamina Torah Eid Echad, Halecha Charov Deos, Vasu Shtei Nashim B'isha Achas. Wherever the Torah believes one witness can go by the majority, and so 2 women is 2 versus 1 woman. Kishnei Anashim B'isha Echad. It's like 2 men against 1 man, and 2 beats 1, right? So it's not a simple majority question. It's like we're going to follow the same rules as we do for valid witnesses, in which a 2 witness group always beats a single witness, right? Because that's the rule. So we go with the same thing with the invalid witnesses. We go with the same rule. 2 versus 1 invalid witnesses wins. Okay, but if it's one versus but um, but two women, two invalid witnesses against one regular witness, that's like a case of 50-50. So in other words, it's not there's one doesn't beat out the other, which is kind of I mean, all these are a little strange. So that would we resolve the mission of that. Why do you need these two cases in the Mishnah of like all these different variations? Like you're basically just trying to address what happens if invalid witnesses are involved here. Or why do you need all these different cases? What you might have thought, when do I follow the majority of invalid witnesses if it's more strict that way? In other words, when that would require you to do the Eglah Rufa thing, but where it leads to you not requiring the Eglah Rufa, maybe we don't follow this majority rule thing. Kamash Malan, no, it tells you it's either way. You follow with invalid witnesses, you follow the majority of invalid witnesses. Okay, so we had this passage in the Mishnah, Misharaba Haratzli. Once there were a lot of murderers, they did away with the Eglah Rufa. Bryce says the same thing. Because the whole reason for an Eglah Rufa is you don't know who the murderer was. It's not saying that they like intentionally did away with it. It's just that people murdered openly, so there were always witnesses. There was never any doubt. The murderers were brazen enough that people knew their identity, and so there was no cause to have an Eglah Rufa. There was never any doubt about it. When there were a lot of adulterers, they did away with Sotah. Where do we get this from? It says that when Sotah is affected, is killed by the Sotah water, the husband is innocent, right? So what does this mean? What we're interpreting this as, this only happens when the man is innocent. But if he's not, if the husband is not innocent, then the water doesn't do anything. The pasuk that we quoted in the Mishnah, my V'yomer, what does it mean? The Omer, and it says, like usually it says Shanama. Why do you need another proof? Maybe it's like maybe it's trying to say his own sin, his own infidelity will cause the waters not to work. But maybe if his sons and daughters are not faithful, maybe that doesn't have any effect, which you would think is the case. But Tashma will see differently. That verse that we brought as the second source, it refers to not only you being unfaithful, but your sons and daughters being unfaithful, which implies that for our purposes, that if sons or daughters of the husband are unfaithful, that also affects the utility of the waters, and they don't work on the wife. And also, like you might think that this applies only if let's say the daughter who is unfaithful, like whether she's single, right? So that's not a capital offense, right? It's not the same as a married woman committing adultery. So maybe the wayward ways of a single daughter do not invalidate the Sotah waters, Tashma. So that's why we bring that other pasuk. Kihem im hazonos hiparedu im hakadeshu zuzabechu. Men are are consorting with harlots and prostitutes, implying that somehow this implies that this has to do with these harlots are not married; they're single. But even so, their activity cancels the efficacy of the Sotah water. What about the end of the verse? The people that don't understand will stumble. The prophet is telling Israel, if you are strict about adultery, then the waters will work. If you're not, then the water doesn't work. So I think that this implies that it's like the whole society. If the whole society is shall we say, libertine and does not abide by the principles of faithfulness, then the Sotah water won't work in general. So it's not just within your family, it's like if the whole society is corrupt that way, then the Sotah water does not work. Let's press on a little further. When there were a lot of people who lived well, right, who had a lot of pleasure in things, then justice was perverted. And people's actions, deeds, they became worse. In other words, too much luxury, and it affects people's behavior. And God is not happy with the world. And when there were a lot of judges who showed favoritism, they stopped practicing the stricture of, to the judges, don't be afraid of anybody when you pass your judgment. And also they stopped practicing lo takiru panim b'mishpat, not to show favoritism in your court. The parko al shamayim, and people took off the yoke of heaven, and then they just replaced it with now they were, instead of serving God, they were serving others, right? They were under the thumb of other people that they, for whatever reason, were showing favoritism to. When there became a lot of people who whispered in judgment, which I think means people whispering in the judge's ear, right? Like Rasputin types, right? Controlling the court. Then anger increased, presumably God's anger increased among the people. And the Shechina went away. God stands in the presence of judges. So if they're not judging right, if the judges aren't the ones who are judging, but they're being told what to do by others, then God doesn't participate in these courts anymore. When there were a lot of people who took bribes, judges presumably, Rabu ha'omrim l'rato v'latobra. So that increased those who turn things on their head. They called evil good and they called good evil. In other words, if you're taking bribes and you're passing the wrong judgment, obviously you're turning things on their head. Misha Rabu ha'omrim l'rato v'latobra. Once that happened, Rabu hai hai ba'olam, the crying of woe increased in the world. Misha Rabu Moshe harok. When they're able to spit, long distances, Rabu Hayihirim, the number of arrogant people increased. In other words, spitting, like spitting on the ground in front of you is normal, but spitting, trying to spit across the street, that's basically like who would do that except for someone who is arrogant. Um, Nismatu Talmidim, and their number of students of Torah decreased. And the Torah is like wandering around looking for somebody to study it. And once this increase of arrogance came about, then men started to marry these arrogant people because our generation only sees the surface, right? Doesn't see true character, arrogant matter, then other people are impressed and they don't look at their real character. Any, is that so? But don't we have another saying that someone who is arrogant, even his family members don't buy it. An arrogant man, his oath will not endure. Meaning even in his own home, right? So, like, how come you're saying that women are fooled by these arrogant people when this other verse indicates that in your own home, even in your own home, you're arrogant, but your family members aren't buying it. So where it says Mekara yeah, we're talking about that single women would like jump on these arrogant people and marry them, and then in the end they would find out that they really are not a good character. Yeah, let's go a little further and finish up this passage. When the number of judges who like steered business to their business partners, when that happened, that increased bribery and perversion of justice. Upaskatova, and goodness ceased. A number of judges who showed deference to people in their court, saying, "Oh, yeah, I remember when you did me that favor," and said that to people in their court. That led to people doing what they want, right? They're not afraid of judgment anymore because they figure that the judge. Shvalim hukbu v'hagavoyim hushvalu, and those who were low became raised, and those who were high became low. Umachusa azla v'navla, and the authority of Jewish rule deteriorated. When you had an increase in people who were misers and people who would grab whenever they could, then that led to people being reluctant to lend to the poor. And that contradicted what it says in the Torah. The Torah warns against not lending to the poor, but when people became greedy, they stopped lending to the poor. When there were women who walked around with their necks stretched out and their eyes winking, right? They were, being too forward. Rabu Mayim Hamarim. Then the Sotah waters increased, the incidences of Sotah increased. El Shapasku, but of course, as we saw in our Mishnah, that actually led to the Sotah ceremony being canceled because there was too much immorality. Hold on one sec, sorry. Um, Misharabu Makable Matanos, when judges, when increased judges who accepted gifts, Matu Hayamin Niskastru Ashayim, people's lives were shortened. To see the Sani Matanos Yichya. As it says, one who hates gifts will live. Noise gifts, and I think we're talking about gifts given improperly to judges, that shortens life. Misharabu Zechuche Halev, the number of people who were arrogant, Torah scholars increased. Rabu Machlokas B'Yisrael, that increased the number of arguments, right? Because everybody thinks they're right. Misharabu told me they Shammai B'Hillel Shaloshim Shu Kol Sarkan, when you had a lot of students of Shammai and Hillel that didn't spend enough time with their teachers. Rabu Machlokas B'Yisrael, that also increased the arguments because they didn't get to see the character of Hillel and Shammai. They just got their views on things, and they defended those views even to the point of not being respectful to their intellectual opponents. The Nasi's Torah Kishtei Torahs, and the Torah became split into two. Misharav, like you had Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai, you had different views and outlooks on things. Misharav Mekabel Tzedakah Min Ha'odei Kachavim, when we started accepting too much charity from non-Jews, Hayu Yisrael Lamala V'hem Lamata. Then this is presumably a Lashon Saginar, like a euphemism. It actually says Israel was up and they were down, but I think it means the other way around. Yisrael Fanim V'hem La'achar, and Israel in the front, and the idolaters in the back, but actually is using a euphemism to say that like once we started accepting charity from non-Jews, we became the basket cases. Okay, let's call it here and pick up here tomorrow. Have a good day, everybody.
Have a good day. Thank you very much.